Hey, what's up, everybody? We are live over there on YouTube. I'm going to add in our friends over on Facebook and on Twitter, and then we're going to get underway. Just a minute behind. No big deal. All right, we are live on Twitter. What's up, everybody? We are live on Facebook. We are live with the Falcons Podcast with your host, Garrett Chapman. Thank you so much for jumping in here. We have big news day, like seemingly like there is every day. It's a 365 a day, a year league. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Every other day we had something else coming out. So, and the Falcons just stay in the news. And so we're going to react to some of the stuff that we learned today, specifically with Darnell Mooney. Maybe we can see some other cut candidates. Plus, how did this decision impact what the decisions are going to be made in the future? I think it kind of put the writing on the wall for some other people and maybe some things that are going to be going on down the line. And then we're going to do a little bit of a free agency primer. We're going to get into a little bit of what's going on here coming up over the next couple of days, because the legal tampering period, which is, in my opinion, it's silly. It's a little silly. Just start free agency on Monday. I don't know why you have to wait. I don't know why you have to call it a legal tampering period, but I'm sure it's in the collective bargaining agreement, and I'm sure there is some legal jargon, some legal reason why it has to happen. But whatever. All we know is that free agency technically begins on Monday, but then it officially begins a couple of days later at 4 o'clock. So very excited to get into all of that. I see some comments starting to pour in. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. As always, I will be taking your questions here on the Falcons Podcast. Drop them in there. Drop them in the chat. We'll chat. We'll go back and forth. We'll have a little bit of fun here on the show today. But as always, if you have something that you specifically want to push straight to the front of the line, super chats. Those are the best way to push that stuff all the way to the top, just to make sure that your question gets answered here on the show today. And it also supports the podcast. So I really appreciate you doing that. But give me a follow at GChatPTL. We got a lot of content coming out over the next couple of days. Make sure to jump in there. All right. Well, I'm just going to say hi to some people because I see Kiara's over there. She says, hey, G man, nice haircut. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. King Atlanta Supporter 1 says, what up? Colin says, yo, G Chap. What's up, my man? Michael Ronquillo hits the double hearts. Always a pleasure, my friend. King comes back and says the Falcons will be getting a lot of new people. Yes, they will. It's a brand new regime. It's a new era, and that's going to be reflected here over the next couple of days, and it's going to give us the blueprint of what this draft could potentially look like. King was up there. John Norman says, what's up? What's up, my friend? Kira says, hey, King, hope you're enjoying the sunshine. It is a gorgeous day here in Atlanta. I'm not sure if everybody here in the chat is from Atlanta or lives in Atlanta. It is stunning. It is absolutely stunning. This is a sit on the back porch type of night. Just enjoy a glass of wine or maybe a nice cold beer. One of those types of evenings here in Atlanta. And first of many to come this spring. Red Swarm says, good afternoon, G. Afternoon to my fellow Dirty Birds. What's up, my friend? King comes through, says, should the Falcons bring Mike Evans to Atlanta? That's an interesting question. We can bring that up. We can talk a little bit about that here. Because I think ultimately Mike is a good player. I don't think that Atlanta is necessarily going to be the place for him. I think he's going to end up going to Buffalo. I think is one that I wouldn't put past him there. Buffalo would make a lot of sense, even though they just made that big deal earlier today. They need wide receivers. I think less so now that they have made the move for DJ Moore, but Philadelphia is another one that could make sense, assuming that they move AJ Brown. He's got the size, speed, and physicality combination. I mean, it's all fantastic, but you've seen his age starting to catch up with him just a little bit. I mean, it would be pretty fun to stick the knife into a Buccaneers fan, but at the same time, I don't necessarily see the Falcons spending that kind of money on a receiver, especially one that you kind of sort of have a guy in Drake London who's going to you have a guy in Drake London who's going to come in and do effectively that same job. So no, I don't think that necessarily makes the most sense, but I do have a lot of other wide receivers that could. Aaron says, what's up? What's up, my man? Cornell Sims 3704 says, why are we not talking about the potential of Jordan Davis becoming a free agent target? That's an interesting one. I mean, we can definitely do that. Let me look. What is he looking to make here? Jordan Davis. Of course, I mean, he's the big-bodied defensive lineman coming in from the University of Georgia. I'm trying to see his contract. Sorry. Okay, so he is in. Is he a free agent this year? So no, he has a club option. Did they not pick up his 5th-year deal? I can't remember if they actually picked up his 5th-year deal or not. Because if they did, it looks like they checked it. It looks like they did. So if he is in the 5th year of his deal, the 5th-year option, I couldn't get a quick answer. So if somebody knows the immediate answer to that, I think they did pick it up, but I'm not 100% sure. If they didn't, then he's a free agent, and he could stand to make anywhere between $10 million or something like that, $15 million. He'd be an interesting piece to drop in here because you need big-bodied players. You need some run stuffers because you're losing all of them, like every single one of them. I think of the 9 contributors that you had last year on the defensive line, 6 of them are going to head out the door. David Onyemata is a player that you might want to retain. He was your run stuffer last year, but he's gone. So you're going to have to replace it with somebody. Jordan Davis is, assuming they didn't pick up his 5th-year deal, which again, I need to make sure that they didn't do. But for that price tag, I mean, he's got to stay healthy. I mean, that's going to be an important thing. I think he's dealt with a handful of injuries up there in Philadelphia, but again, that remains to be seen. I do have a defensive lineman on here that I really want to. We're going to get into my wish list here in just a little bit. King comes back and says the Falcons will be Super Bowl champions. I believe it, everyone. From your mouth to God's ear, my friend. We'll see. Listen, they got to get to the playoffs first. They haven't been to the playoffs since 2017. So, I mean, we'll see. John Norman says, nope, Louisiana. I'm not sure what you're referring to with Louisiana. It says, I hate the Saints. Oh, you're in Louisiana. Okay. Yeah, that sucks. That's unfortunate. I mean, Louisiana is a great state, but lots of Saints fans. Let us pray sports 1141 over there on Facebook or on YouTube says he's injured half the season every year. No thanks. Fair enough. All right, let's get into some of the big news from today. If you guys have questions, of course, I'm going to take as many as I can throughout the course of the show. So make sure to drop that stuff into the chat, and I'm going to get into as much as I can here throughout the course of the show. But I'm going to jump into some other content and drop those comments in there. So let's talk about some of these cut candidates and the implications now that Darnell Mooney has officially been released. Kirk Cousins, he was released earlier, technically already, but he will be released as soon as the league year starts. He'll be allowed to enter free agency. Darrell Hodge, he also was released, and similarly to Darnell Mooney and Kirk Cousins, he will enter free agency. The current cap hit of Kirk Cousins is $24 million or something around that. I mean, we'll see what it actually ends up being with whether or not they use the post-June 1st cut or not. But that just impacts when the money hits the books. So that's the important thing to keep in mind there. Darrell Hodge doesn't really matter. I mean, they're going to cut him and they're going to save, I believe it's $2.6 million against the cap again this season. But with Darnell Mooney, I mean, it sucks what happened in 2025. He was fantastic in 2024. He had the 64 catches, almost 1,000 yards, would have had 1,000 yards for the second time in his career, but he did have the career high 5 touchdowns. But injuries, they popped him. He never recovered from having his surgery on his collarbone on the first day of camp, and he never got healthy. Kind of rushed his way back into things, and then he pulled his hamstring, and then that was lingering throughout the course of the season, and just never got to full health. And I mean, he basically cut his production from the year before in half. But the unfortunate reality too is that 32 catches, 443 yards, and a touchdown, that's basically what he was in 2022 and then in 2023. So 3 out of the last 4 years now, that's who he's been. And for a guy who carried a cap hit of $18 million, it's just not good enough. And it's unfortunate, but he never realized that potential here in Atlanta for any sustained period of time. And the Falcons are going to save at least $7 million against the cap, just assuming they cut him right now. But they could also do a post-June 1 designation, and they could save $12 million against the cap, but then they'd have to carry some of that again over next season. But those are the 3 guys who are currently cut. Those are the guys who are, at least by reports from NFL insiders. But who else could join them? I've taken a look down here at some of the people who could be cut candidates over the next couple of days. Charlie Warner is one. He's a tight end. He's kind of an H-back. He's just a sixth offensive lineman. He could carry some savings. He's a guy that I'd like to have, but for the price tag of almost $6 million, I think that's a little rich, and moving on from a blocking only tight end, you can find that whether in the draft, you can find that with one of your later picks in the draft. You could potentially find that at a much cheaper rate in free agency if you just want to find some depth pieces. I mean, Tegan Quintaro, he's a guy you can bring back. Felipe Franks is a player you can bring back for probably a fifth of what that costs, probably at least that much. And if you end up cutting him right now, you add $1 million in dead money for 2026, but you would save $4.75 million, which would already pay for another tight end, an affordable tight end. That's pretty good. That works out pretty well for the Falcons. So I think that needs to be something that they consider. Kyle Hinton's another one. He's a guard, depth player. He had he played the one game for Matthew Bergeron last year. I believe that was the game out in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. But he could be a candidate for the Falcons this offseason. He carries a cap hit of $3.25 million. The dead money of $500,000 for 2026 is negligible for a depth player, but $2.75 million against in savings against the cap. I think that could be at least something to consider. And we already talked about Kaderl Hodge as a player who has moved on. So those are three players. I mean, that would open up some actual money for you so that you can go and make some deals specifically with the players that we're looking at. Maybe it helps you retain some of these other guys. So let's take a look at some of these so we checked out the cut candidates. So let's take a look at some of the players that the Falcons are losing in free agency. So it's a bunch of them. I'm not going to get into all of them. I just basically touched on the notables. Let's put it that way. So I'm going to take a look at Arnold Ebiketie. It's Caden Ellis, David Onyemata, Tyler Algier, Leonard Floyd, D. Alford, Zane Gonzalez, and Bradley Pinion. These are the big ones, the ones that I determined to be the big ones, I guess you could say. And we're just going to go person by person. So tell me in the comments if they should stay or go. If you disagree with me, just let me know. And then tell me why. But Arnold Ebiketie, he's the first guy that's on my list. Originally, he was a candidate to go. But because you saw the way that he didn't regress as much as it was his role in the defense on that rotation just sort of regressed. Only 3.5 sacks last year, I believe. It was not a great year considering he had 6 sacks each of his last 2 seasons. Kind of looked like he was realizing some of that potential at the end of 2024. I think it was 5 sacks in the last 6 or 7 games of the season. But with all the ongoing issues with James Pierce off the field, with the legal issues, with the domestic violence arrest and all the subsequent legal stuff that's going to be going on, Arnold Ebiketie becomes a stay candidate. Depends on what you can get him for. I think I've seen some of the price tags that some people have speculated, and all of it's speculation at this point. You have the market rates. I've been using Spotrac. Some other ones, like specifically for my wish list, some people carry a much higher expected value than what you have on there. But Arnold Ebiketie, if you can get him for, I don't know, $6, $7, $8 million, $6-ish million, maybe on a 1-year deal. He's still only 27. He's a former second-round pick. He's got some good tools. And I think year 2 with Jeff Ulbrich in a bigger role, you could potentially start to see him do or deliver on some of that potential. 16.5 sacks over his 4 years in Atlanta. But, if Pierce is not on the Falcons moving forward, which, again, that remains to be seen, then Arnold Ebiketie becomes your starting edge rusher alongside of Jalen Walker. And I think that could be a pretty interesting matchup. So that's what, for that reason, he's a stay candidate for me. Caden Ellis is a difficult one because Caden Ellis, the signs are starting to point to his time in Atlanta coming to an end. That's not to say he's not a good player, because he's an impact player for this defense. He has been for every year of this contract that's coming to the team in 2023. And shoot, man, Jeff Ulbrich said that it was going to take 2 players to replicate what he does for this team. And that's both on the field and off the field. He's a leader. He wears the green dot. But it seems like the price tag for Caden Ellis is just going to continue to go up, 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 up. He's getting some interest from outside parties. You look at what Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler put out after the combine, and it seems like Caden Ellis is going to generate some attention. And that's not good for the Falcons. It means that his price tag is going to go up and he's going to get more expensive. And for an older linebacker, I think that it's maybe not worth it to spend that kind of money on him. I think his production is going to continue. I think he's still going to be a valuable player. He does not miss time due to injuries or anything like that. But if you can get him on an affordable rate, great, do it if you can. But if it gets too expensive, then it's time to move on. And the more I've gone through this draft class, the more I see some very, very big impact players here on this defense. And Divine Diablo was really the linchpin of this defense. He was the thing that made this group go. So if you can get a really talented player with some upside, match him with Divine Diablo in the middle, and you can see what you can do with that. And then not have to pay what looks like it's going to end up being 11, 12, 13, $14 million for Caden Ellis. Again, I'm speculating on the price. I mean, it's just, I was hoping that it was going to be somewhere in the range of $8 million. But it's looking to be in the double digits there. David Onyemata, that's another candidate to go. He also joined Caden Ellis back in that 2023 class in free agency. Atlanta's going to lose a big chunk of its defensive line. And if you want to bring somebody back on a one-year deal, David Onyemata might be your guy. But also, this unit needs to get younger. They've aged up a little bit, and the three guys that they do have coming back, they're veterans with Rook and Brandon and Zach, but this front need to add several bodies to the room. And for the price tag that David Onyemata is going to add, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be your best option, because there's also somebody on the free agency market that I really, really want. But he was one of their better run stuffers, and it's just more evidence that this team needs to invest in its defensive line and continue to add to this room. It's just, I think you need to get younger. I think that needs to be an emphasis for them moving forward. Tyler Algier is the next one, running back. Obviously, we love Tyler Algier. Everybody in the city knows Tyler. We all love Tyler. Having spoken with him on several occasions and being in the locker room around him, I see why. He's a great guy and he's a damn good football player. But he wants to be a starter, and he's earned that opportunity. And Josh Kittle is reporting that he's asking for about $7-8 million on a 3-year deal. And that's AAV, so average annual value of so about $22-ish million over 3 years. And that's just going to be too expensive for the Falcons. He's a backup running back in Atlanta. Obviously, you got Bijan Robinson and best player in football. And Tyler's just not going to have a role here moving forward. So unfortunately, you might see this guy blossom. I saw it was the Athletic Football Show put something out on just his ability to just be a bell cow back and go get 15 carries for however many yards and run through a brick wall and do whatever needs to be done. I like the idea of Tyler Algier doing that. It's just unfortunate that he's going to have to do it for another team, So if he gets that opportunity, great. I'm going to be rooting for him. But he reminds me a lot of Michael Turner. When Michael Turner was here in Atlanta, he was the backup running back for LaDainian Tomlinson out there. And I guess at the time it was San Diego. And then he comes to Atlanta and he becomes Michael the Burner Turner. And I think Tyler Algier maybe doesn't have the speed that Michael Turner did. But I think he can go and be a bell cow power back for somebody and make them very happy. But for the price tag, it's just too much for the Atlanta Falcons. So unfortunately, he is a go candidate for us. Leonard Floyd, the edge rusher, obviously 34 years old, or he will be 34 by the time next season kicks off. He's bounced around a little bit. I think he's played for 4 teams over the last couple of years. He signs that 1-year deal to come in, but it's $10 million. He was supposed to be a spark for this pass rush, which, you could say that he did to some degree. But for $10 million, production was 3.5 sacks. He did provide the leadership. I remember talking to James Pierce, talking to Jalen Walker, talking to Nate Ollie, guys like that. He's a leader. And having a guy like that is important, but he is a go candidate for me because he's old. And 34 years old by the time next season kicks off, I don't know. And that's going to be one of those things. If you can get him on an affordable contract, I don't know if he wants to play for $4 million next year, but I just can't stomach the idea of paying a guy like that $10 million. That's what he was owed last year. And I doubt he gets that on the open market this year. It's going to be a couple $1 million less than that, I would say. But if you can get it down a little bit further, then I think that makes a little bit more sense. D. Alford, he had a resurgent season last year. 2025 was a revelation for this guy. 2024 was a disaster, but 2025 was just fantastic. He was a perfect fit for what Jeff Ulbrich wanted in that secondary and that defensive scheme. I mean, he's a versatile player. He plays inside. He plays outside. He stepped in for injured defensive backs. He played for A.J. Terrell at one point. I believe he played for Mike Hughes at another point. But then after Billy Bowman got injured, he stepped in and played the nickel spot. So while Billy Bowman's coming back from this Achilles injury, I think it'd be wise to have a guy like D. Alford who can at least hold the line in the early parts and then just be a really good depth player there for the Falcons. But this is one that comes all down to price tag. I have him as a stay candidate because I like the guy. I think he can add to this unit. I think he's a good secondary piece. And he's flexible, so you can play him inside or outside, and he'd be good either way. But that's important to remember that he's a depth player, right? So that number needs to be closer to $3 million. If it gets all the way up to $5 million, I'm not trying to nickel and dime these guys, even though I'm talking about literally millions of dollars. In terms of the salary cap, I'm not trying to nickel and dime these guys. But at the same time, if it's up to $5 million or somehow north of that, then it's time to let him go. And maybe he can find it with somebody else. But hopefully he can stay in Atlanta because I was a big fan of his. Bradley Pinion's the next one. Bradley Pinion has been a good punter for Atlanta. I believe he signed a $6 million contract the last time that he was here and in this market or on the market. But the Falcons already added Trenton Gill on a futures contract. Gill, I don't know how to pronounce that, unfortunately. Gill. I think it's Gill. So apologies, Trenton. But that says to me that the writing's on the wall. Trenton's a guy with NFL experience. He's punted the league before, and Bradley Pinion, for the price tag, you can afford to go cheaper. He was steady for the Falcons. He had some bad punts last year, and it hurts you on occasion. But he also set the franchise record for punts down inside the 20. So, I mean, he's capable. He's good. But this is a position that you can afford to go cheaper. And unfortunately, Bradley, that's just the way I see it. Zane Gonzalez, kicker. He's a state candidate for me, and this is one that I've kind of waffled on just because Zane has had a history of fluctuating performances. If you go look at his career logs, he has a good year and then he regresses. And then somebody cuts him and he goes sign somewhere else and he has a good year and then they cut him. And it's just kind of like that waffly sort of thing. So if the Falcons want to get ahead of that, then you move on. And there's actually some pretty good kickers out there on the free agency market. So if you wanted to go get a different kicker, there's a chance that you can actually go and do that. But if you really believe that he can continue to do what he did throughout the course of this year, which he was consistent, I think he had one true miss, I believe, this year, and the other two were blocks, then great, good. You can get him on a pretty affordable deal probably and see what he can do. But I would not be surprised to see them bring in kicking competition one way or the other. But that's just where it stands on that. So that is the Falcons free agency primer. So those are the ones that stand out to me specifically. I'm going to dig back into some of these comments. I see some people admit I've missed a couple of them. Excuse me. I got to catch back up. Kira says Arnold Ebiketie keep cheap if he can be affordable. I think that'd be a good option for the Falcons. I would love to keep Arnold Ebiketie, but I think he's shown that he can be a solid depth player. But I've seen some numbers that get him up into 8-9 million, and that might just be too expensive for me. Let us pray says he still needs to go. Bye-bye. No AK there. More like a 45 special. That's funny. Kiara says definitely want to keep Ellis, but he's going to get paid somewhere. Yes, he is. And good for him. Ultimately it's going to be very expensive, and Lettuce comes back and says the same thing. He's going to be expensive, and he's a good player, right? He's a good player. He's had over 100 tackles every year that he was here. And what he's able to do makes a lot of sense for a team like the Falcons because he can still be used as a pass rusher. In a perfect world, he's not being asked to do as much off-ball linebacker where he's like dropping into coverage and everything like that. He's not a great coverage linebacker, but that's where the presence of Divine Diablo really unlocks what Caden Ellis is able to do. And why you saw it. He didn't regress. It's just he was asked to do more and take on a bigger role, which, again, he's capable of doing. But when Divine Diablo got hurt, that's what it was asked of him. But Caden Ellis is, if it gets too expensive, it gets too expensive, and you have to move on. Kira says, talented and smart linebackers especially need intelligence. There are a lot of those in the draft. David Brooks says, what's the deal with Troy Anderson? That's a good question, and it's one that the team is still trying to figure out right now. So he's theoretically a candidate for what's called a tolled contract. They haven't made their decision on it yet, it comes back to a player who was on the PUP list at the beginning of the season and goes the entire season on the PUP list and never comes off. There's something called tolling. And that means that basically his contract would reset and he would get another year. This isn't something that I'm throwing out there necessarily. It's just, this is my understanding of the rule. It hasn't been officially announced by the team yet, and they're still trying to make those decisions. And I don't know, there's this whole jargon with the collective bargaining agreement that they have to get through. But I would anticipate a decision on that is going to come in the next couple of days, or at least some kind of announcement like that. Kiara says, let's go Tyler. Good luck, Nuke. Yeah, good luck. Good luck. He's a player that I think every single one of us can cheer on at the next step. The next step of his career, I think that's going to be a big one for him. Lettuce says, give the ball to Tyler. Haha. But yeah, he's gone. He gave his Atlanta his all, though. Yep, we love him. Kira says, let go Alvin, AK, Arnold Ebiketie, and Floyd. Definitely need more picks then. Yeah. So Arnold Ebiketie was a keep. He was originally a let go, but since all the stuff happened with James Pierce off the field and everything like that, he needs to be a stay if you can afford him. But they need more picks. They need a lot more picks, and how they get those picks, we'll see. It's just the simplest way is just to trade back in the draft. But I know a lot of people on this podcast, a lot of people commenting, and some people in this community, they've talked a lot about trading Jesse Bates. I'm not big on that necessarily. But if you do, and you can get something really good, and you can move the money off the books, and I guess, I don't know. It's just disappointing. I don't want to trade Jesse Bates. I know my fiance would be livid. She loves Jesse Bates. Jenners, man. What's up, my friend over there on Twitter? Says, I think if Seattle moved on from Walker, Algier would be a great retool guy for them. I completely agree. I actually think that Seattle would be an ideal position for them. They did not franchise tag him, so they will be able to enter some negotiations. We'll see if they actually retain him. I'm sure they'd love to have him there. The other one for me was Denver. I think Denver would make a lot of sense. Some people have speculated that Tampa Bay could make a lot of sense. New Orleans could make a lot of sense, especially since Alvin Kamara is moving on. Probably, I mean, he's going to be exceedingly expensive for the Saints. So if they move on, maybe they can get him in there, Tyler Algier, and see what he can do there. I think he would actually be a tremendous player on the Saints, as much as it pains me to say that. The Texans are a player that could potentially pull him in. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals can be one. I mean, there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people who could use a guy like Tyler Algier, and I think he's going to make some team really, really happy. Kira says stay, but bring in young kicker. Yep. I'm assuming you're talking about our boy Zane Gonzalez. I think that you need to bring in somebody to compete with him and see what he can actually do. Put the pressure on. Lettuce comes back and says, I'd keep Floyd. Let Alvin AK. Whenever I see AK, I always read Alvin Kamara. But Arnold Ebiketie, you say let walk. Just my humbled opinion, though. I agree. That's fine. You got to keep one of them. I would imagine you have to keep one of them. And if I'm the Falcons, I think I would rather go with the younger guy with some upside. Flo dealt with a lot of injuries last year, and I think it happens when you get into your early 30s. Man, I feel it in my lower back, dude. But I mean, he's a little bit older than I am, but ultimately, this is a guy who, I mean, he's had a great NFL career. I think that there's a very good chance that he considers retirement just at that age. Kira says, yeah, I'd rather keep Floyd, but he played better than Arnold Ebiketie, plus didn't get the third down plays because James Pierce Jr. was on fire. Yeah, James Pierce, there was a period there where he got a sack in like 5 straight games or 6 straight games or whatever it was. I think that if you have Arnold Ebiketie as a more refined piece of the rotation with a bigger impact, I think he can go back and continue to do that. Dibble says, love the fresh snip, brother. What's up, my man? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I had to look good, where I'm going to a wedding this weekend, so I had to snip it up and get this taken care of. Shinners comes back, says, anyone but the Saints, please. Please, I hope not. I hope he goes outside of the NFC South because I do not want to see our guys try to tackle that wrecking ball of a running back. As much as it would be fun to see him play live and everything else like that again. But we'll see. King Sean says Tyler to the Broncos would be crazy. I think that would be fantastic. I think that would make a lot of sense for them. They need a running back. They need some consistency at that position, and he could be a good option for them. Jay Way says, do you think the Falcons will look to trade Pitts, or does that depend on what they do at quarterback this offseason? I think there's a very good chance that they trade Kyle Pitts. I think that would make a ton of sense for the Falcons. You need draft capital, and a $15.5 million tight end isn't necessarily a necessity. Like, you don't need a tight end. That's why you shouldn't have drafted him at number 4 anyway. But again, old regime, old problems. But he's really good. He's a really good player. I would rather have a really good player in the draft, ultimately, than a $15 million tight end on a 1-year deal who, if he plays really well, he gets more expensive. If he plays poorly and reverts back to what he was in 2022, 2023, then he's a really expensive player this year who's not giving you production now. So it's a lose-lose for the Falcons. Like, that's just where they are. Unless they extend him and maybe you can get him on a great deal or something like that. I just don't see that happening necessarily. Maybe we'll see. But that's the unfortunate reality of a tight end who was drafted at the capital that he was and has had such fluctuating performances. That's why it's so frustrating. But I think he'd be a good trade candidate because obviously the potential is off the charts with this guy. I mean, he could potentially go and be a Travis Kelce type. He can go be a beast, a major impact player. Depends what you can get for him. If there's somebody out there who offer you a first-round pick, take it. Second-round pick, take it. Third-round pick, probably need a little bit more. But we'll see. TBD. Colin says, traded for Tyler in my dynasty, expecting big things from him this upcoming season. I have him in my dynasty, and so I'm really excited. I think it's going to be awesome. Baylor Bear says Texans need all the offensive line free agents. Texans need a lot of things. They got a quarterback, but and they got a good wide receiver, and they got a great edge rusher. But aside from that, man, they have some needs. Colin says, I wouldn't say Texans just because they traded for Montgomery. Oh, yeah, you're right. So let me take that back. Yeah, so I forgot that they traded for David Montgomery. Good call out, Colin. Good call out. Foreign says, G Money, what's up? What's up, brother? Jay Way says, I would take a third rounder for him if they can get that. If Ian Cooks, maybe a second. But I don't see that. Yeah, he's not getting a first round pick. He's just not. I mean, that's just not the way that it's going to go. But a man can hope, right? A man can hope. I think if they can get a second round pick for him, then I think you need to consider that. Then you could potentially get a high end defensive lineman and a wide receiver in the second round of the draft this year. That would be very good for the Falcons. Robert Walker says Tyler to the Seahawks. I think that would make a ton of sense. All right, let's dig into some of my wish list here for the Atlanta Falcons in free agency. So I've dug it down to, I only have 4 positions on here. I know a lot of people have talked about Tyler Linderbaum. Great player, but the fact that the Ravens offered him a market reset contract and he still said no tells me that he is going to be so prohibitively expensive that the Falcons would be foolish to go get him. There are some other centers on the market that I think the Falcons could consider, but ultimately that's a position that if you choose to make a change with Ryan Newsel, which you don't have to, then I think you do it in the draft. I think that just makes the most sense for the Falcons. Quarterback, I expect them to add one in free agency. Defensive line, I expect them to add one in free agency. Wide receiver, I expect them to add one in free agency. And then an edge rusher. So in this instance, I'm going to go through this. So Boyamafa is my edge rusher. He's going to be very expensive. So this is one, if you are absolutely not getting James Pierce back, and you're probably going to be able to recoup some of his money. That's probably the only way that I'd go after Boyamafa, right? So he was a dominant a part of that dominant rotation out there in Seattle, is 20 career sacks, but he reminds me a little bit of, what was it, Milton Williams from last year from the Philadelphia Eagles. He goes and plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, wins the Super Bowl, and then signs that big contract. Despite not incredible amounts of production, but I think he can drastically improve this Falcons defense, assuming that James Pierce is not on this roster moving forward. And you probably have to be moving on from an Arnold Ebiketie there. You match him alongside of Jalen Walker. I think that could be really interesting. It's a mid-level team, a need for the team right now. You've got the lingering legal issues, but it also becomes a bigger need the more players walk out the door. So if you continue to lose players, then it's going to be something that you need to address. But quarterback is one. We talked a lot about Kyler Murray and Joe Flacco. Those are the two guys on my list. And that just depends on what the front office wants to do with Michael Penix. If they really believe that Michael Penix can be the guy and then you're going to really put him in the fire and see what he can do, then Joe Flacco is going to be your guy. I expect Joe Flacco to be the guy one way or the other. That's my expectation. That's my prediction as of March 5th, year of our Lord 2026. Kyler Murray, though, would also be a pretty awesome addition. I talked about it on 92.9 The Game. I've talked about it here. $1.3 million for a two-time Pro Bowl player. Good player. And I think that at the very worst, he's a mid-level player with the potential to be better. And if the Falcons go a different direction, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better one than Kyler Murray, especially at that price tag. On the defensive line, one of the reasons I said no to David Onyemata is because I think the Falcons need to go all in on John Franklin Myers. $18 million or so, that's what he's probably going to cost. He got 7.5 sacks last year, and you talk about the versatility of a guy who can play inside and on the edge. He flourished last year with the Broncos, and I think he could do the same in this attack-minded defensive front from Jeff Ulbrich. You get a guy like that, he would be a bona fide upgrade over David Onyemata, and he would slot in. I believe he'd replace is a hard word, but he'd be your starter, and then you'd be able to rotate 4 guys on that defensive line, and then you go add some rotational players. Those 3 guys, John Franklin Myers, Ruka Rororo, Brandon Dorlus, and Zach Harrison, all of a sudden, that is a quartet that's fantastic. And you rotate those 4 guys alongside of some other dudes who can come in and get some playing time there, or that's Lakeil London or whomever else. That would be fantastic. And that's my defensive lineman. That's who I want. There's a whole list of them. I put a bunch out there. You can head over to Falcons on SI. You can check out that full list. But then looking at the wide receiver position, this is another one that I expect them to do. It just depends on what they want to spend, because a guy like Rashid Shaheed can come in and be a downfield threat for you. He may cost you about $13 million. He's not an elite wide receiver, but he is an elite kick returner. And you can take advantage of that at this stage of his career. He can do a lot of different things. Put the ball in his hands and he makes an impact. But if you want to go get a younger guy with some upside, Calvin Austin's one. He can get down the field in a hurry. He's a little small, but at the same time, he's fast. He's fleet, and he can make contested catches pretty effectively for his size. Jalen Naylor's one. You could be getting him 11, 12, $13 million or something like that. Romeo Doubs is one if you want to spend a little bit more money. He seems like a big breakout candidate. 55 catches last year, 725 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think he's going to get a bunch of those prove-it type deals because he's this, but that's also a really crowded wide receiver room up there in Green Bay. So if you're able to get a good contract from him, like affordable, maybe you put an extra year on the deal when everyone else is offering the 1-year prove-it deal for him. And then I think if you can get that number down to 12, 13, I think Romeo Doubs could be a very good option here for the Falcons. And the last one's Keenan Allen, which is one that I heard, I think I saw him on Sports Illustrated, and it was interesting to me because Keenan Allen, I mean, he's capable. We've seen that. I mean, he's got hamstring issues that have flared up recently, especially. He's one of the older receivers that you could potentially go get. But Michael Penix needs another friendly target. And Keenan Allen gets open, and he catches everything. He's shown that he's still capable. He has plenty left in the tank there, just based off of last season. 80 catches, almost 800 yards or something like that. And he still gets into the end zone. And you put him on the other side of Drake London. I think that could be a pretty dynamic duo. But a temporary one. So if you go get Keenan Allen, I think you can get him on a relatively affordable deal. And then you draft a wide receiver potentially in the third, fourth, fifth round. We don't have a fifth round pick, but if you get him a wide receiver in the fourth round, then all of a sudden, like a Bryce Lane or something like that, or Bryce Lance, then you've got a chance to develop a younger player. You can see what Michael Penix can do, and you're not investing in putting a lot of stock out there to where you can still go and make big moves here later on, 27, 28 years beyond that. But we'll see. We'll see that. Shenners comes back. My man, it's good to see you, buddy. If we drafted Penny Sewell instead of Kyle Pitts, Matt Ryan would have played longer, but then it's also possible the Arthur Smith era lasts longer than it did. Scary to think about that. Yeah, I mean, look, Penny Sewell was one. I believe the players who went, I think it was like 12 of the next 13 players. I think it's like 10 all-pro teams and 24 Pro Bowls or something like that between like the next 10 people. I mean, it's nuts. And I mean, first team all-pros. Could have had Micah Parsons, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, lots of really talented players. Penny Sewell, like Shenners mentions, but oh well. P-Shen said, I would love Falcons Flacco. I would too. I think that's my prediction. That's my prediction right now. That's who I think it's going to end up being. Robert says Romeo would be crazy. Maybe. We'll see. I think he could potentially upgrade, but Calvin Austin says, let us pray. Sports said, yeah, this could be a good option. I like Calvin Austin. I think he showed he still has some good stuff in the tank. Once Aaron Rodgers got to Pittsburgh, and I mean, if he can continue to I mean, he has a role, and if you can get him on an affordable deal, he'd make a lot of sense. All right, last question here. Lettuce comes in and says, I don't think Drake and Kyle Pitts complement each other. I completely agree. I don't think that they do. I think I said that on Tuesday, but yeah, this is a situation where Kyle Pitts has to prove it, and Drake was not healthy, and it's not ironic that Kyle Pitts, his production came in that time where Drake was hurt. Half of it. 4 of his 5 touchdowns came when Drake London was hurt. 53% of his receiving came in the games where Drake London was hurt. Drake eats up the intermediate targets. Yes. Eats up almost all the targets. So only one will be able to thrive. One has to go. Do you believe Drake is a $30 million a year wide receiver? That's a good question. I think yes. I think he has that ability in him. He's, aside from last year where he dealt with the PCL injury, he's durable. He's big, so that means he's going to last. He doesn't rely on speed and athleticism. He relies on his big frame and his ability to block, block out receivers. That's a great question. I think that he's going to have some longevity. He's going to be able to play for a long time. So I'm a little bit more comfortable paying him a contract like that because the drop off is not going to be quite as stark later in his career. It just makes sense for the Falcons. Kyle Pitts, I think Kyle Pitts could potentially find a next gear. But again, I think wide receiver is a more important position than tight end. That's just my opinion on the matter. And I think that ultimately Kyle Pitts, it's a TBD. He realized some of that potential, but we shall see. All right, y'all, I appreciate it. A lot of fun. We went about 45 minutes today. So lots to get into here over the next couple of days. The next time that I'm on here, we are going to have some legitimate free agency signings to talk about. So you have to set your reminder. You have to jump in here, join the Falcons podcast, 6 o'clock on Tuesday. And then next Thursday, I got a big surprise for you. So you got to stick around. You got to set those reminders because we do this every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. Set a reminder. Jump in here. Ask those great questions that you guys always do. I know, and I really appreciate all of you guys for jumping in here, whether you're live or you're watching after the fact, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys jumping in here from the bottom of my heart. I mean, we got hundreds of people jumping in here at any other time. You guys taking some time out of your day to hang out with me here and talk some Falcons football. But again, appreciate it as always. We'll see you again on Tuesday where we will have some legitimate free agency signings to talk about. No more speculation. Well, maybe we'll have a little bit because speculation is all sorts of fun. All right. My name is Garrett Chapman. This has been the Falcons podcast. Really appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you guys again soon. But till then, let's go Falcons.